about a dozen employees and a budget a little bit over $1 million. We have an office in Pittsburgh, an office in Lewisburg, and an office in Philadelphia. We have 5 attorneys.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say, because I always give the answer when they say how many people work at the place. I always say about half of them. I thought you were going to be the guy that was going to say that.
No, they all work very hard. I'm very pleased with my staff.
What do you see in your dealings with getting letters from inmates and things like that the public just doesn't know about being incarcerated that they should know?
Well, I think the society in many ways takes the out of sight, out of mind approach to prisons. People commit wrongdoing. There's a general consensus they have to be put away for a period of time. And they don't want to hear about it when they're put away. They don't want to hear from the guards or the wardens or the inmates. So I think it's important for society not to allow that to happen, to shed light on what goes on in these institutions, because these are human beings and they're going to come out. 90% of them are going to return to your neighborhood. So we don't want to just forget them and write them off. We need to examine what's going on. And there's organizations such as the Pennsylvania Prison Society that has a legal right to visit inmates. That is a very important function that they serve by shedding light and keeping the institutions open. And if you keep them open and they know there's volunteers coming, it improves the overall operations of the facilities, in my opinion.
Is there a reason, and this is a base question for you, but I just have never understood this. Is there a reason that when somebody is incarcerated, that very frequently they are placed very far out of the area that they lived in, and it makes it harder for relatives to visit, for them to keep a connection?
We've gone through, during my course of my career, a very punitive phase that we're finally coming out of. But part of that punitive phase was exactly what you said. They would send you to the farthest institution from your home and force you to try to work back to that home institution over a period of time if you exhibited good behavior.
It just makes it difficult for them to maintain a connection with the family, because I think a lot of people don't realize that if you're talking to somebody who's incarcerated, and there should be limitations, but you're on a very limited time span. Calls can't be forwarded. They have to be taken by the person. They're monitored, and they should be. Mm-hmm. But there's a tremendous expense. It's like old long-distance rates, you know? Yes,
that's a problem we've addressed recently with some success. We brought an action in front of the Federal Communications Commission to reduce the phone rates. I brought some litigation here in Pennsylvania to reduce the phone rates, and we've gotten them down. In 1995, when they deregulated the telecommunications industry, there was a guy that did a very important study and said, this is going to backfire for certain situations like prisons. It's going to create a monopoly situation, and it's going to increase rates rather than reduce rates. So we used that to go before the FCC and other groups to argue that you've created a natural monopoly, and the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections would put out to bid, the services of the prison, talking 2 million phone calls a year, and the companies were charging outrageous sums, similar to what you suggested, what you would pay in a hotel room. $25 for 3 minutes. And slowly we highlighted the issue, got some public support, and got a good ruling from the FCC, and then sort of shamed the Department of Corrections, who was making a fortune on these contracts, to reduce rates. And we got a bill passed to allow for prepaid phone cards available in the commissary. So we slowly but surely got these rates down to a very reasonable rate, which is where they are now. We also stressed that contact with family is one of the most important things on rehabilitating an inmate. So you don't want to make it prohibitive that they can't talk on a phone. And as you mentioned, they're sent far away, so visits are very difficult. And then phone calls are very expensive, and you limit an individual's ability to keep in contact with his people back in the home state, where that's where, you're going to get positive reinforcement and hopefully help you rehabilitate yourself.
Yeah, it just seemed like in many ways it was removing a thread of a connection to the humanity that the person had left, and a bit of their hope. And even writing letters, you have to buy pre-approved.
You're given a certain amount of free letterheads. So you're given 10 a month.
Oh, okay. I didn't see it's changed since I had a friend that was in there.
Yeah. Well, there's the First Amendment to the Constitution says you have the right to freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. And the last phrase says, and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. That has been interpreted that the inmates have to have the ability to address, get access to the court system. And in order to have access to the court system, they have to have free letterheads and pens and pencils and a law library. So that's, in the prison context, that's how they've interpreted that clause of the Constitution.
What would you be doing if you weren't doing this? And you couldn't do law. I'm gonna throw that at you.
Well, I wanted to be a baseball player.
Okay.
And I couldn't hit a curveball. And I wanted to be a basketball player, but I was too short. I don't know. I could have gone into sports writing or sports announcing, being a big fan. Something, or maybe refereeing, umpiring, probably something sports related.
It's funny you say that, because we had talked before, and I said that, people in journalism, law, and education, they know what they want to do. But when you were saying that, you reminded me, I've had two other people that mentioned, that they were frustrated at their inability in sports. And that was, like one person wanted to be a golfer, but his shoulder got thrown out. So.
I will say this, thinking a little more, I did consider journalism. When I graduated from law school, I did apply to a couple newspapers to be a journalist, because I enjoy journalism. I enjoy newspapers. I enjoy radio, TV. So that's another possibility.
What do you think, stepping out of your wheelhouse, what do you think about the state of journalism in the country?
I was just talking with someone the other day about the death of newspapers. I read several newspapers every day and enjoy it, but I understand, especially from my friends in the business, that it's a dying business, that people are going to the internet for their news. And as such, print journalism is becoming an extinct species. We're working on a case now in Berks County, suing the county jail because of what we believe to be discrimination against females. The females who are trustees and in work release are housed in cells, whereas the men are housed in the cushy community reentry center next door. And so gotten to know a reporter from the Reading Eagle, Karen Shuey. And the Reading Eagle is a fine newspaper. It's a family-owned paper.
It's an old school paper.
It's an old school paper. John Updike started at the Reading Eagle, but it's fallen on hard times, and the family just sold it to one of these venture capitalist groups, the same group that gutted the Pottstown Mercury, the Norristown Times-Herald, and they're going to gut the Reading Eagle, and they're just going to fire half the staff and run wire service stories, and it's a tragedy. But that's what's happening, sadly enough, all across the board.
Well, there is a model that's a thing that's a hybrid that's called Tap Into, that allows people, former reporters are grabbing it up, and they have a digital backbone that's applied for them, and they can still report the news without having the back cost on it. And it's kind of a franchise almost. It's an interesting hybrid that I don't know where it's going to go. I agree with you about the way the news is going now. Digitally, we can get more information, but we can also get our information pigeonholed to us and narrow our scope of our understanding versus expand it. And I think that concerns me a little bit. I think there's there's something about the tactile feel of going through a newspaper and reading a story.
I think that as you suggest, the ability to slant the news one way or the other is less so in a print media than it is on the internet. You know, we had these investigations into the last election and the allegations that the Russians were using social media for propaganda purposes, I believe is probably correct. I mean, they were creating false websites and false organizations and spreading their message. And so clearly it seems there's more potential for abuse on the internet where it's virtually unregulated, whereas the print media is pretty much traditional, set in their ways for better or worse.
Yeah, I think it's anything can be corrupted. I think it's just a little harder to corrupt the print media.
Correct. You get incompetent stories or reporters, and then you get one or two that lie, but for the most part, it's pretty good.
It is. And what would you say to somebody who is thinking about doing what you do?
Well, you're not going to get rich. We're on the low end of the scale for the lawyer market. But if you want to do something that you believe in, you want to do something that will affect people's lives, then I think it's a very good profession. I'd say you're not going to get wealthy. I would define richness in different ways. Yes,
you're not going to get wealthy.
You're gonna live a comfortable life, certainly.
Right. But you will have satisfaction in the deeds that you do and the lives that you touch, like an educator. You may eat ramen noodles longer than you wanted to for a period of time, and not drive a new Tesla every year. But you'll have other things. When people leave the prison system or they're about to get out on parole, they have to take classes. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
They don't have to. When you go in, they give you a plan, what you need. If you've committed a violent crime, you need, aggression. If you've committed a sex crime, you need sex therapy. If you committed a drug crime, you need drug rehabilitation, alcohol, etc. So they give you a roadmap when you come in based on your crime and your background. And if you follow those things, you'll get out sooner than later. So in that sense, yes.
If the scheduling is messed up with you and you can't take the classes, it can delay you getting out then.
Yes.
Okay. And is that ever an issue? Have you
Yes,
seen
it can create a legal claim. If you have to take a course and the prison is overcrowded and doesn't give you that course and that results in you spending more time there, that's a legal claim.
Oh, interesting. Have you do you have any particular success stories that you're just proud of that make you feel like this is why I do it?
Well, I'll give you one. It's a little old, but it was still 1989. A ship ran aground in the harbor in New York called the Golden Venture, and there was a couple hundred Chinese immigrants, and they came ashore and they were taken to York County Prison. And the Bar Association rose to the occasion and recruited lawyers to represent them. And it created a group called PERC, which I've been on the board ever since. And they brought a case to me, a Miss Joe. Miss Joe had the audacity to have 2 children while she was living in China, and they were both boys. And that violated the one-child rule in China. And they're especially concerned if it's 2 males. And she had two boys, so she was really in a lot of trouble. So she was apprehended and forcibly sterilized and penalized the amount of a year's income, which she couldn't afford to pay. And as such, she lost her right to public education for her children and public health care for her family. Her husband got sick, went to the hospital, was turned away, and he died. The kids had to be sent away because they couldn't be educated in the public schools. So her family got some money together, and she got on a tramp steamer to Guam. And Guam is an American protectorate, and she asked for political asylum based on the one-child rule. They transferred her to the York County Prison, and I was assigned to her case. I hired a gynecologist to prove that she had been forcibly sterilized. I researched the one-child rule and presented the case, and we were successful. And she gave me a very nice sort of blanket thing that I have on the wall to thank me for my efforts. So I was very pleased with the outcome of that case.
That's interesting because nobody can get you ready for that, You don't wake up knowing that's going to happen one day.
Came down the road, and a couple years later, I managed to get her children in as well, and they all live in Atlanta.